The clinking of silverware and the hum of brunch chatter filled the restaurant, but my mother's words sliced through it all like a knife. "She's only invited because I felt sorry for her," Mom said loudly enough for the whole table to hear. Her voice was coated with venom, a smirk tugging at her lips as she reached for her mimosa. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us, where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos? And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us what would you do in this situation. Be honest. Tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. The table went silent. My sister laughed under her breath, whispering something to her fiancé as though the humiliation of her own blood was entertainment. My father shifted uncomfortably, but not once did he defend me. I set my cup of tea down gently, my hands steady, even though my heart felt like it was being crushed in front of everyone. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. Instead, I sipped again, the porcelain rim cool against my lips, masking the burn in my chest. Inside, though, a storm raged. I had been through enough of her cruel remarks over the years, comments about me being the disappointment, the failure, the charity case of the family. And here she was, putting it on display in front of relatives and strangers alike. "So quiet," my aunt murmured across the table, her eyes flitting toward me with a mix of pity and curiosity. "You never fight back, do you?" I met her gaze. My voice came out calm but sharp. Some people let their actions speak louder than words. For a brief moment, silence wrapped the table. My mother scoffed, tossing her napkin onto her lap. "Actions? Please, what actions? You live off scraps. Don't embarrass yourself." Her cruelty wasn't shocking anymore. What shocked them all was how I didn't flinch. I wasn't the girl. They thought they could break, and then, an hour later, the air in the restaurant shifted. The door opened, and every head turned when a tall man in a tailored navy suit walked in. His presence carried weight, the kind that silenced chatter and drew attention without effort. His dark hair was neatly styled, his step steady, and his gaze unwavering as it scanned the room until it landed on me. My heart raced, not with fear, but with a satisfaction I had been holding on to all morning. "Emma," he said as he approached, his voice deep, steady, commanding. Mom froze. Her fork slipped from her hand and clattered against the plate, echoing across the table. Her face paled as if she had seen a ghost, because standing there was my husband, Daniel Lawson, the man she never believed existed. The man she thought I had made up when I refused to share details about my private life. But now, here he was in flesh and blood, more powerful, more commanding, and more devastatingly real than anyone at that table could have imagined. And for the first time in years, my mother had nothing to say. The restaurant seemed to stop breathing. Forks hovered midair, conversations stalled. Even the waiters hesitated in their steps as Daniel pulled out the empty chair beside me and sat down. His hand brushed mine briefly, calm, steady, protective. That single gesture was enough to silence every cruel whisper I'd endured at this table. "Sorry I'm late," Daniel said smoothly, flashing a polite smile at the relatives who had been gawking. Traffic was brutal. His tone was casual, but the weight of his presence pressed on everyone like a thundercloud about to break. My mother's lips parted, but nothing came out. She blinked as if she was trying to convince herself this was real. You're her husband?" Her voice cracked, and for once, the sharp edge she always used on me dulled into disbelief. Daniel tilted his head slightly, his jaw tightening. "Yes, and who are you exactly?" Her mouth opened and closed, a fish gasping for air. I'm her mother." He leaned back, eyes narrowing, and in that moment, the table understood. He wasn't just anyone. His confidence, his control, his very existence radiated power. People like him didn't wait to be introduced. They commanded the room without asking permission. My sister Amber was the first to break the tension with a scoff. "This can't be real. Emma? Married? To you?" She laughed as though the idea itself was a cruel joke. "I mean, come on, look at her. She can barely afford her rent." The words stung, but I didn't let them see. Daniel's hand tightened. "Over mine," before I could speak. "Funny," Daniel said, his voice deceptively calm. "From where I stand, she's the strongest, most capable woman I've ever known. Maybe that's why she doesn't waste her time trying to tear other people down." Amber's smile faltered. Her fiancé shifted uncomfortably beside her. I could feel eyes burning into me from every angle. Relatives who once ignored me, cousins who whispered about my failures, all staring now, wondering how they had missed the truth. Mom finally snapped out of her daze. "Wait," she said sharply, her voice trembling between outrage and desperation. "If you're really her husband, then who are you?" Daniel pulled his wallet from his suit jacket, placing a sleek, embossed business card on the table. The golden lettering gleamed under the light. Silence deepened as my aunt leaned forward, squinting at the name. Her eyes widened instantly. "Daniel Lawson, CEO of Lawson Global Holdings?" The shock that followed was a wave crashing through the table. My uncle coughed into his napkin. My cousin's jaw dropped. My sister's fiancé muttered a curse under his breath. But my mother, she went pale. Completely pale. Her fork lay forgotten on her plate, her manicured nails twitching as she reached for her glass of water. "You've been mocking your own daughter," Daniel said, his tone sharp now, "while she has quietly stood taller than every insult you've thrown her way, and yet you didn't even notice." The way he said it wasn't angry. It was worse. It was controlled. Cold. Each word carved deep into the silence like a blade. I sat there, still and quiet, but my heart pounded. For years I had dreamed of this moment, not revenge exactly, but justice. Proof. A mirror held up to the people who had spent their lives humiliating me. Amber laughed again, but her voice cracked this time. "This is ridiculous. You're lying." "Emma can't. She wouldn't." Daniel turned to her, his eyes narrowing. "Do you think she's beneath me? That a woman has to prove herself to you before she's worthy of love? Maybe you should ask yourself why you're so quick to sneer at someone who's done nothing but endure your cruelty with grace." Amber flushed red, her mouth snapping shut. For once, she had no clever insult. My mother finally found her voice. Again, but it shook. "Emma, why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you tell us?" I let out a slow breath. My voice, calm and steady, filled the table. "Because every time I tried to share a piece of my life, you turned it into ammunition. You never wanted to hear the truth. You wanted to hear something you could use against me. So I learned to keep my silence. Silence was safer." Her eyes flickered with something I hadn't seen before. Not remorse. Fear. Daniel's gaze swept across the table. "She doesn't need your approval. She doesn't need your validation. And she certainly doesn't need your pity. She has everything she needs right here." He lifted my hand, pressing his lips to my knuckles. A subtle but undeniable declaration. The room around us was tense, every relative frozen between disbelief and awe. But I wasn't looking at them anymore. I was looking at my mother, watching, her mask finally crack. For years she had lived off superiority, reminding me at every turn that I wasn't enough. But now? She looked small, shaken, cornered by the truth she couldn't laugh away. And I sat there sipping my tea again. The taste, sharper now, sweeter even. Because for the first time in my life, her silence belonged to me. My mother's fingers trembled as she set her glass down, the faint clink louder than the chatter that had started to return around the restaurant. But at our table, no one dared to breathe too deeply. The air was heavy with everything left unsaid. "I don't understand." Mom whispered, her eyes darting between me and Daniel as if searching for a loophole, an escape. You've been hiding this from us? Why? Her voice wasn't soft from love. It was laced with fear, the kind that only comes when someone realizes the power has slipped out of their hands. I tilted my head, keeping my tone calm. Hiding? No. I just stopped offering pieces of myself to people who never cared to listen. My aunt shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her gaze flickering between us. Marilyn, she said quietly, addressing my mom, you've been harsh. Maybe it's time you admitted that. Harsh. The word hung in the air like a cheap substitute for years of cruelty. Harsh? I finally said, laughing without humor. You call it harsh when your own mother tells you, in front of strangers, that you're nothing? When she invites you only to humiliate you? I looked straight at Mom. That's not harsh. That's deliberate. That's cruelty dressed up. As family. Daniel squeezed my hand, but I didn't need reassurance anymore. I was standing on ground I'd built myself. Amber broke in, her voice sharp. Oh, give me a break, Emma. You always play the victim. Maybe if you'd actually done something with your life, Mom wouldn't have to feel ashamed. The words hit, but they didn't wound. Not like they used to. Instead, I leaned forward, my eyes locking with hers. Ashamed of me? Or jealous? Of the fact that I didn't beg for scraps of approval the way you still do? Her cheeks flushed. She opened her mouth to argue, but Daniel's voice cut through, low and steady. Careful, he warned, his tone sending shivers across the table. You have no idea the kind of strength it takes to endure what she has. Amber's fiancé shifted in his seat, his hand tugging at his collar. He looked ready to disappear. But my mother still wasn't done. Her pride wouldn't let her sit silent for long. You think bringing a man here makes you superior, Emma? That we'll suddenly treat you differently because of his money? Her words were sharp, desperate claws clinging to the last shreds of control. I met her glare with quiet certainty. No, Mom, I don't want your approval. Not anymore. This isn't about money. This is about respect. Something you never gave. Me, no matter how hard I tried to earn it. Her face twisted, the cracks in her mask spreading wider. For the first time in my life, she looked unsettled. Vulnerable. Daniel leaned forward, his gaze pinned on her. You've spent years underestimating her. But here's what you never realized. Emma doesn't need your pity, and she never did. The truth is, she's stronger than this entire table combined. The silence that followed was suffocating. Amber tried again, her voice shrill now. This is absurd. You're just trying to make us look bad. I turned to her, my tone soft, but edged with steel. You don't need my help for that. You've done a great job all on your own. Laughter rippled from a distant table, someone overhearing, though not understanding. But it cut through the tension, a reminder that the world outside this drama still spun while my family's empire of cruelty was crumbling piece by piece. My father finally spoke, his voice low, weary. Enough. His eyes were on me, but they carried none of the venom my mother's did. Emma, I didn't realize... No. I cut him off, my voice steady. You realized. You just stayed silent, and silence can be just as cruel as the words she throws at me. His face hardened, shame flickering but quickly buried. I looked at them all. The family who had laughed at me, mocked me, turned every gathering into a stage for my humiliation. And for the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt seen. Daniel's arm brushed against mine as he leaned back. I think we're done here, he said. His tone wasn't angry. It was final. But before he could rise, my mother blurted out, her voice cracking. Wait. The single word pulled every gaze back to her. She sat frozen, her hand gripping the edge of the table. Her lips trembled, and for a moment, she looked old, fragile. Emma, she whispered, I didn't mean. I lifted my hand, stopping her. Don't rewrite the story now. You meant every word. The only difference is today, you finally saw that your words don't have power over me anymore. The weight of the moment pressed against my chest, but it wasn't crushing. It was freeing. Daniel stood, pulling me gently with him. His presence was like a shield, but I didn't need shielding anymore. Not here, not now. I looked back one last time, my voice clear. I came here today to drink tea, not to beg for love. And I'm leaving with exactly what I need. The room seemed to exhale as we walked away, their stunned silence following me like a shadow. But for once, it wasn't my burden to carry. It was theirs. And as we stepped out into the sunlight, Daniel's hand warm in mine, I realized something I'd waited my whole life to feel. Freedom wasn't about running away. It was about standing tall, even when the world tried to push you down. The sunlight outside felt different, warmer, brighter, like the air itself was lighter without the weight of that table pressing on me. But I knew it wasn't over. Families like mine never let things end cleanly. Sure enough, my phone buzzed before we even reached the car. Amber's name lit up the screen. I didn't answer. Moments later, another buzz, Mom this time. Then Dad. Call after call, one after another, as if they were scrambling to patch the cracks in the image they had so carefully curated. Daniel glanced at the phone in my hand, then at me. You don't owe them a response, he said quietly. I swallowed, hard, my chest tight. I know, but I want them to hear me, one last time. So I answered, Emma. Mom's voice came through, high-pitched, frantic. Please don't leave things like this. We just didn't know. You didn't want to know, I cut in, my voice steady but sharp. You never asked. You never listened. Every time I tried to share, you turned it into a weapon. And now you're scared, not sorry. Her silence on the other end was deafening. Amber's voice broke in, shrill. You're blowing this out of proportion. You embarrassed us in there. Do you realize how you made us look? I laughed softly, the sound bitter but free. Funny. You spent years humiliating me in front of anyone who would listen. But the moment the truth makes you uncomfortable, suddenly I'm the villain? Daniel reached over, placing his hand gently on my knee. A silent reminder. I had already won. Emma. Mom's voice trembled now, desperation seeping through. We can start over. Come home. Bring him. We'll talk as a family. No, I said firmly. You don't get to call this family when all you ever gave me was shame. I have a family now. One that doesn't need your approval to exist. The line went silent. Then, softly, I added, You'll never use me as your scapegoat again. And I hung up. For the first time in my life, the click of that call ending didn't fill me with guilt. It filled me with peace. We drove in silence for a while, the city rolling past outside the windows. Then Daniel reached for my hand, his thumb, brushing across my skin. You didn't just stand up to them, he said. You freed yourself. His words settled into me like truth I had always known but never claimed. That evening, as we sat on our balcony overlooking the skyline, my phone lit up again. Texts this time. From cousins, from relatives. Some apologizing, some curious, some suddenly wanting to catch up. But I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I looked at Daniel. For once, I whispered, I don't feel small anymore. He smiled, pulling me close. That's because you never were. You just finally see it. The city lights glimmered. Below, but they couldn't match the glow that came from inside me. My mother's fork hitting that plate, her face paling at the sight of Daniel. Amber's silence when confronted. Those weren't just moments of revenge. They were reminders that no matter how many years they tried to crush me, I had risen higher. And the best part? I hadn't needed to scream, beg, or fight for it. All I had to do was stand in my truth, finally and completely. That night, I muted every chat, silenced every call, and for the first time in years, I slept peacefully, because my silence no longer came from fear. It came from power. Sit there. My mother's sharp voice cut through the wedding chatter, her manicured hand pointing at a tiny round table shoved against the wall, right next to the restroom doors. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us, where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos? And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us, what would you do in this situation? Be honest. Tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. Laughter rippled from the main hall where glittering chandeliers glowed over the grand reception. Crystal glasses clinked, music swelled, and my brother's new wife twirled in the center of the floor. But here I was, stuffed at a kid's table with paper straws and spilled apple juice. Seriously? I whispered, my voice trembling but steady enough to carry. You made me sit next to the restroom? My sister Rachel smirked, her sequined dress shimmering as she leaned closer. Well, Lily, what did you expect? Real seating is for family. Don't make a scene, okay? The word family sliced into me. Guests whispered, some pretending not to notice, others sneaking amused glances. My nephew giggled, flicking ice at me from his soda. My chair wobbled against the sticky floor. The smell of disinfectant wafted every time the restroom door swung open. I clenched my jaw. My hands trembled under the table, but my eyes stayed, fixed on Rachel. Family, I repeated almost to myself. Got it. They thought I would crumble. They thought I would beg for a seat at their table of chandeliers and champagne, but I didn't. Instead, I rose, slowly, deliberately, my chair scraping the floor in a sound that silenced nearby chatter. Every eye turned. My father frowned. Where do you think you're going? I met his gaze, my lips tightening into the faintest smile. Away from the trash can you call my seat. And I walked. Past the glittering tables, past the smirks, past my mother's hiss of, "Don't you dare embarrass us." My heels echoed against the marble floor as the doors slammed shut behind me. Outside, the night air bit cold against my skin, but it felt clean, cleaner than the suffocating banquet hall. My chest rose and fell, heavy, furious. 10 minutes. That's all I gave them. Because 10 minutes later, the sound of polished shoes clicking against the pavement made heads turn inside. The doors burst open. My husband, Mark, broad-shouldered, commanding in his tailored navy suit, stepped in with an expression that froze the room. Rachel's painted smile vanished. Her champagne flute nearly slipped from her hand. My mother stiffened. My father's jaw tightened, and as Mark's piercing gaze swept the room, it landed on me first, standing at the threshold, silent but unbroken. "Where's my wife?" His voice was calm, low, but it carried like thunder across the hall. Rachel's smirk collapsed into a trembling line. Her eyes welled, her shoulders stiff. She had mocked me only minutes ago. Now she was the one on the verge of tears. The air turned heavy. Guests whispered, shifting uncomfortably. And for the first time that night, my family looked unsettled. Because they finally realized what they had underestimated, and they weren't ready for what was about to follow. The hall had gone silent, as though someone had ripped the music cord from the speakers. All the laughter, the clinking of glasses, the endless bragging chatter, gone. The only sound was the click of Mark's shoes against the marble floor as he strode straight toward me. People whispered, heads craning. "Who is that?" "That's her husband?" "He looks important." Mark didn't acknowledge a single one of them. His dark eyes were fixed on me, sharp and unwavering, and for the first time in the entire evening, I felt something no one in that room had offered me: protection. "Lily," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Come here." I walked to him, my steps steady despite the storm boiling in my chest. His hand brushed mine, warm, grounding, and then he turned, finally addressing the room full of gawking relatives. My mother rose quickly, plastering on a smile. "Mark, dear, we didn't expect you tonight. We thought you were busy." Her tone dripped with false sweetness, as if 10 minutes ago she hadn't shoved me into the shadows. Mark's gaze didn't flicker. "Busy?" he repeated. "Busy while my wife sits shoved by a restroom like she doesn't belong here." Gasps rippled across the tables. My father stiffened. "Now wait a minute." "No." Mark cut him off, his tone sharp as steel. "Don't. You've all had your fun humiliating her, haven't you? Treating her like she's less than you, like she doesn't carry my name, like she doesn't deserve respect." I walked in here, and what do I see? My wife abandoned, seated like a child, at a table meant for leftovers. "Tell me, is this how you celebrate family?" The words dropped like stones. The guests shifted uncomfortably, some lowering their eyes, others watching with stunned fascination. Rachel's lip trembled. "We didn't mean—" Mark turned to her so suddenly she froze. His stare pinned her in place. "Didn't mean?" "You laughed in her face, Rachel. You told her she didn't count as family." Rachel's painted confidence cracked. Tears welled, blurring the glitter in her eyeshadow. It was a joke." "Then why aren't you laughing now?" Mark asked coldly. The silence was deafening. Every table seemed to hold its breath. My father stepped forward, puffing his chest. "That's enough. This is my son's wedding. Not your stage. Don't come in here trying to—" Mark's voice cut through him like glass. "Stage? You think I enjoy this? You think I wanted to walk in here tonight and see the woman I love treated worse than a stranger? You humiliated her in front of everyone. And for what? So you could feel superior? So you could remind her that she doesn't fit into your perfect little circle?" My mother tried to interject, her hands shaking as she reached for Mark's arm. "We just wanted things to go smoothly." Mark pulled away, his tone sharper. "Smoothly? Nothing about this is smooth. You don't push someone into the shadows and call it love. You don't humiliate your daughter, your sister, your blood, and pretend it's normal." The weight of his words made the chandeliers above seem to rattle. And then, slowly, he turned back to me. His voice softened, though his eyes remained burning. "Lily, you don't need to stand here another second. You don't need to beg for their respect. You've done enough. Come home with me." Something in me broke free. The tears that had been burning in my eyes finally spilled, not from weakness, but from release. For the first time, I wasn't standing alone. I nodded, whispering, "Let's go." We turned to leave. Chairs scraped as guests shifted uncomfortably, whispers filling the hall. My father's face reddened, my mother trembling beside him, and Rachel, my perfect sister with her perfect life, was crying silently, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "Wait!" she called suddenly, her voice cracking. "Lily, don't go!" The desperation in her tone silenced the room again. My heels paused against the marble floor, but I didn't turn. Rachel's voice shook. "I didn't mean it, okay? I shouldn't have said what I did. Please, don't leave like this. Not at my wedding." Mark's arm slipped protectively around my shoulders, and his next words cut with a finality no one could ignore. "You should have thought of that before you put her by the restroom." And with that, we walked out. The doors swung shut behind us, leaving only stunned silence and Rachel's muffled sobs echoing through the grand hall. Outside, the air was cool and fresh. I exhaled, my body trembling as if it had been holding this in for years. Mark held my hand tighter. "They'll regret this," he said softly. I looked at him, my voice steady now. "They already do." But deep down, I knew this wasn't the End. The night had only just begun, and the tables had turned in ways my family never imagined. The moment we stepped outside, my phone buzzed nonstop in my clutch. First one call, then 5, then a flood of messages lighting up the screen. My mother, my father, even Rachel. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not yet. Mark opened the car door. For me, his jaw tight, his silence louder than words. The ride home was filled with the glow of the city lights racing past the window, my pulse still hammering in my ears. "They'll spin this," Mark finally said, his voice low. "They'll try to paint you as dramatic, ungrateful." I let out a bitter laugh. That's their specialty. But my phone kept buzzing, desperate now. "Answer 1, Mark said quietly. "Let them speak. Sometimes silence hurts more than shouting." I hesitated, then swiped the screen. Rachel's name blinked at me. Against every instinct, I answered. Her voice came through broken, rushed. "Lily, please don't hang up. I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean for it to go that far. I thought it was funny." "Funny?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. "You thought humiliating me in front of your guests was funny?" Her breath hitched. "I was wrong. Please, just come back. Mom is panicking, Dad's furious, and people are asking questions. You're making us all look bad." Mark glanced at me from the driver's seat, his eyebrow arching. I pressed the phone harder to my ear, my tone icy. "Rachel, you made me sit by the restroom. You laughed while people stared. And now you want me to save your reputation?" Her silence was telling. Then a sniffle. I can't fix this without you. Please, Lily." I didn't answer. I hung up. The buzzing started again instantly, but this time I powered the phone off. Mark's hand reached over, resting on mine. "You don't owe them your peace," he said softly. For once, I believed him. By morning, the fallout was everywhere. A cousin had recorded part of Mark's speech on their phone. It spread through the family group chat like wildfire. My father's face red with anger, Rachel trembling, my mother's desperate excuses. It was all there, caught in shaky but undeniable footage. The video leaked beyond family too. Friends of friends shared it. Soon neighbors and co-workers had seen it. The comments? Brutal. "Who makes their own daughter sit by a restroom? That husband deserves a medal." Rachel crying at her own wedding? Poetic justice. By breakfast, I had 50 unread messages from relatives trying to justify themselves. My mother's voice rang through the first voicemail. "Lily, darling, you know how stressful weddings are. We didn't mean it like that. Please call back." The second was sharper. My father. "You embarrassed us, Lily. Do you realize what you've done? You've turned family against family. Fix this." Mark, reading one of the texts over my shoulder, scoffed. "Fix this? They should be begging to fix themselves." I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. Why do they only care when people are watching? He leaned closer, his voice steady. "Because for once their image isn't untouchable." "And you didn't break it, Lily, they did." By noon, there was pounding on our front door, loud, desperate. Mark opened it, his expression unreadable. On the porch stood Rachel, her mascara smeared, her perfect curls flattened from the night before. Behind her, my mother clutched her shawl, my father stiff and scowling. Rachel's voice cracked the moment her eyes landed on me. "Lily, please. I need you to come back to the reception. People are still asking why you left. They're saying things, ugly things." Mark's voice sliced before I could speak. "And whose fault is that?" My father's tone hardened. "We are still family. Whatever happened, it should stay between us, not out there for everyone to gossip about." My anger rose, hot and steady. "You didn't think about family when you shoved me into the shadows. You didn't think about family when you laughed at me in front of strangers. You only think about family when it makes you look bad. My mother stepped forward, tears in her eyes. We made a mistake, Lily. Please, just help us fix it. Rachel nodded furiously. Yes, just come back, sit with us, show everyone we're fine. That's all I'm asking. I held their eyes, one by one. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the weaker one. I didn't feel small. I didn't feel forgotten. Mark slipped his hand into mine. His words were low but lethal. You don't owe them a rescue, not this time. And I realized he was right. The three of them stood there, waiting for me to bend, to rush in and patch the cracks in the perfect image they'd built. But I didn't. I stayed silent, strong, letting the weight of their own actions hang in the air. Finally, Rachel's shoulders crumpled. She covered her face and sobbed on the porch. And for the first time in my life, it wasn't me crying in front of them. It was them, and they knew this wasn't something they could control anymore. Rachel's sobs echoed against the quiet street. My mother's trembling hands twisted the edge of her shawl. My father's scowl deepened, but even he couldn't hide the flicker of unease in his eyes. For years, I had been the one begging to be seen, to be respected, to be included. But now, they were the ones on my porch, desperate, unraveling. Lily. Rachel choked, her voice hoarse. You don't understand. Everyone's talking. They're saying I treated you like trash. They're calling me cruel, heartless. Please, if you just come back, sit with me, show everyone we're fine. It'll… Stop! Mark's arm slipped protectively around me. His voice was low, sharp. So now it's about your reputation, not her dignity. Rachel shook her head quickly, panic in her eyes. No, I really am sorry, Lily. I swear I'll make it right. Just don't leave me like this. Not today. My father finally stepped forward, his tone stern but edged with something I'd rarely heard from him. Uncertainty. Lily, you've made your point. Enough is enough. Family fights, then family forgives. Don't drag this out. I met his gaze, my voice steady. Forgiveness isn't yours to demand. The words hung in the air like a blade. My mother flinched, tears spilling. Please, Lily, we should be celebrating together, not tearing each other apart. I looked at her, really looked. At the mother who had pushed me aside at every milestone, who had smiled only when I stayed silent, who had watched as others mocked me without stepping in. Celebrating? I said softly. You celebrated without me the moment you put me at that table by the restroom. You celebrated while I sat in humiliation. You only came running when people noticed. The truth silenced them all. Mark squeezed my hand, his voice calm but final. Lily doesn't need to go back. She doesn't need to cover for your cruelty. She doesn't need to save the image you destroyed. Rachel's sobs grew louder. Please, she whispered. I drew a breath, my chest rising, and falling with the weight of years. You made your choices. Now you live with them. I stepped back into the doorway, Mark steady at my side. And this time, I'm not going to be the one fixing your mess. The slam of the door behind us shook the house. On the porch, the sound of muffled cries and my father's low curses faded. Inside, silence wrapped around me. But it wasn't the silence of loneliness. It was the silence of freedom. The days that followed were a storm. The video spread further than any of us imagined. Neighbors, co-workers, even strangers had seen it. Rachel's perfect wedding became a spectacle of whispers. People replayed the moment her face crumpled, the moment Mark's words cut the hall to shreds. And suddenly, my phone wasn't just filled with apologies from family. It was filled with messages of support. You don't know me, but I saw that. Clip, you were so strong. My sister treated me the same way. Watching you walk out gave me courage. Your husband? Incredible. You're lucky. But so is he. For once, the world wasn't laughing at me. They were standing with me. A week later, Rachel showed up again. No makeup, no glitter, no cameras, just swollen eyes and a box of untouched wedding favors clutched in her arms. "I can't escape it," she whispered, standing on my porch again. "Everywhere I go, people look at me like I'm a monster. They call me the sister who humiliated you." Mark folded his arms, his expression unreadable. I looked at her, torn between the old me, who would have bent, who would have soothed, and the new me who finally knew her worth. "You humiliated yourself, Rachel," I said quietly. "I just stopped covering for you." Her lip trembled. "So, what now? Are we just nothing?" The question lingered. I could have said yes. I could have shut the door forever. But deep inside, I realized my revenge was never about destroying her. It was about reclaiming me. "I don't know what we are," I admitted. "But I know what I am now. I'm done being your shadow." Her tears spilled again, but this time she nodded, understanding what words couldn't fix. That night, I sat with Mark on the couch, the glow of the city spilling through the windows. "You were incredible," I whispered. He smiled faintly. "You've always been incredible. I just made sure they finally saw it." I leaned against him, my chest finally light. The pain hadn't vanished. The scars of years of being dismissed, humiliated, overlooked, they would never vanish completely. But they no longer defined me. Because the girl who sat by the restroom? She was gone. The woman who walked out in silence, who refused to return, who faced her family and didn't break. That was me now. And for the first time in my life, it felt enough.